Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not peeking at the coal Santa got me this year, I'm here at the Wolfula reviewing movies. I don't know why coal is treated as a punishment. It's a fuel source. It's fucking useful. Anyway, it's Christmas, the time of miracles. So to be of good cheer, I might as well spread a little holiday fear with a review of this year's biggest Christmas horror movie and the latest entry in one of the most popular slasher franchises in recent memory, Terrifier 3, which has made nearly $100 million at the box office against a $2 million budget, making Terrifier 3 the highest grossing unrated film to date.
I said, let's go!
The amount of money it raked in is especially impressive considering it's an indie film with no mainstream advertising campaign, just word of mouth, and Terrifier 3 definitely earns its lack of an MPAA rating, being just as uncompromising as its predecessors. Well, kinda. Admittedly, I didn't like the first Terrifier beyond the gore and the villain. It felt like a concept film, but I liked Terrifier 2. It delivered on the gore and its villain while feeling like a much more fully realized version of an Art the Clown movie with a stronger protagonist at the center, a focused narrative with actual stakes, and its various other creative flourishes make the sequel a work of art that lives up to its villain's name. So admittedly, also, with the huge improvement of Terrifier 2, I guess it gave me more unreasonable expectations that this upward trend would continue, when that is a rarity with threequels, especially horror threequels. And with that said, after waiting until the holiday season to finally watch Terrifier 3, I can ultimately say that I think it's just fine, and I'll explain how fine in my review of Terrifier 3. But first, a message from my sponsor, me! Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you missed the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Here are the movies I'll be streaming next Sunday. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested in my bonus streams, and I thank you in advance.
What's wrong?
There's someone on the roof.
The 10-minute cold opening of Terrifier 3 is a bit of a microcosm of what the movie is. Happening at an ambiguous point in the middle of the narrative, it's a pretty strong representation of the film's strengths and weaknesses.
Jules, baby, are you sleepwalking?
Listen.
The opening concerns a family on Christmas Eve, or a few days before Christmas.
Sometimes Santa sends a scout a few days before Christmas Eve to make sure our house meets all the necessary safety requirements.
The movie builds up some suspense to Art the Clown's expected infiltration of a home, masquerading as Santa Claus during Christmas time, but the family the opening is concerned with just feels like one of those generic families you see in picture frame stock photos. The family is mostly in bed. We barely know them to feel bad about them being targeted.
Can you take care of that when you wake up, please?
I have been up because you keep talking to me.
The dad just wants to sleep, same with the son.
Timmy, wake up! Santa's downstairs! Oh, way!
The mother and daughter have a blandly sweet conversation, but there's this Terrifier tinge of cynicism to it, where ultimately the mom just wants to fucking go to bed too.
Can we leave some milk and cookies out for the elves?
If you go to sleep right now, I'll go downstairs and leave them a plate.
These characters are ultimately helpless against Art, like nearly every character he faces in this series. The opening is just a cardboard playground for Art the Clown to effortlessly breeze through doing his bloody thing. Like always, the gory deaths are incredible, the main attraction of the film, but it's clear that this opening tries to go further than just the franchise's flashy gore, to be this early attempt at something unsettling and transgressive, where a family, including a little boy,
Juliet, I told you to stay out of my...
is brutally slaughtered on Christmas, the time where we should be giving joy, not taking lives. But who gives a shit about this family Art kills anyway? There aren't any real stakes to the opening beyond maybe not wanting to see a nice little girl get brutally killed. It feels like the movie ironically plays it safe, taking the easiest paths it can, trying to be fucked up. The little boy is mostly killed off screen in his sleep. The dad is also mercifully killed in his sleep. The mom, unsurprisingly, gets it the worst, I wonder why, but the closest thing to a chase sequence in the opening lasts for 10 seconds. This sequence could have easily been stronger, having this mother die specifically trying to protect her daughter, where we could have some time to root for the mother, only for her to fail. But the daughter isn't around when the heat is actually on. The only possibility of stakes aren't there. The daughter hid through the whole ordeal, and her fate is left ambiguous. The movie wants to cross lines, be edgy, but hey, it doesn't want to go too far. I've spoken a lot about the intro of Terrifier 3, but it's only because I feel like its events sum up most of my issues with Terrifier 3, especially compared to the second film. The second film at nearly 2.5 hours could feel long-winded and tedious in places, but what kept it all together beyond art and the gore was a strong central protagonist the narrative mostly focuses on. Sienna Shaw anchors all of the events and kills, so the whole film feels tied together. Even when some of the deaths don't push the narrative forward and are just a neat kill, the characters involved know Sienna, or at least shared a scene with her before Art kills them. Terrifier 2 is a cohesive slasher movie, but Terrifier 3 feels like a return to some of the bad habits of the first Terrifier, where it feels more like a jumble of loosely connected vignettes. But unlike Terrifier 1, Terrifier 3 does have a central narrative with Sienna. It's just that Sienna's story feels very disconnected from Art's story until they arbitrarily converge at the end of the movie. In the wake of Art the Clown's defeat by Sienna at the end of Terrifier 2, like many Renaissance sculptures, Art is headless, but he manages to borrow a replacement head from a cop wandering by. Art would rather not be accused of blackface, though, so he whips up a proper replacement head in the only logical way, as seen in Terrifier 2's mid-credits scene, by somehow birthing a new head through his crazed, freakishly scarred former nemesis turned bestie / I guess mom, Victoria Hayes, the sort of technically survivor girl of Terrifier 1, all as witnessed by Chris Jericho. You had to wait 2 years to finally see Chris Jericho get killed, but the wait was worth it. For some reason, Art and Vicky go into hibernation for 5 years. It's just something they can do, I guess, with Art doing a Black Christmas homage and Vicky becoming a real-life tub girl in the process.
Jesus, it stinks in here.
With the duo seemingly only emerging from their voluntary catatonia because some demo guys stumble on Art and Vicky while surveying the duo's hideout for demolition. And it's safe to say there won't be any demolitions in their future. Art and Vicky team up to, murder people in general during the holiday season, and eventually this dynamic duo goes after Sienna in the last half hour of the film with little to no build-up. That is pretty much the whole plot of Terrifier 3 summed up. Jeez. Vicky kinda barely teams up with Art, honestly. There's an hour-long stretch where she just doesn't participate in the film's events. Her villainous turn feels like a retroactive attempt to develop a one-note character into something more, which is admirable, but Vicky feels at first like a standard Deadite lady or Regan from The Exorcist, apparently possessed by the little pale girl from Terrifier 2.
Bitch.
With that standard, yeah, fuck you, bitch, yeah, ass attitude possessed characters typically have.
Crazy lady, crazy lady, crazy lady.
Doing shit like fucking herself with a shard of glass. But Vicky just ends up dressing herself up as Art the Clown. It just doesn't feel like she has much of an identity of her own. They could have given Vicky her own style of clown costume. It feels like Vicky just exists to give Art the Clown a voice without actually having him talk.
I'm gonna rip your fucking tongue out.
Where she can monologue like a Bond villain instead of Art just killing Sienna.
I'm gonna take everything you love.
Speaking of Sienna, she's released from a recovery center during the holidays to visit her family. Well, her before unseen surviving extended family, at least.
So do we run or?
Gotta sign out first.
Sienna's aunt, uncle, and cousin. These characters don't really matter that much, though, beyond giving Sienna some personal stakes in the plot, at least during the final act.
Never leave you for this long ever again.
Sienna's brother Jonathan is ultimately sidelined and essentially abandons Sienna.
Why don't you come for Aunt Jess's tonight?
I can't tonight.
Jonathan's only other purposes within this film are for Sienna to have somebody to bounce her Art the Clown theories off of,
Demons try to enter our world, only they can't do it alone.
and to provide us with a co-ed couple that goes to the same college as Jonathan that Art decides to go after instead of Jonathan just because the chick is a big Art the Clown fan. I don't fucking know.
The most famous serial killer since Jack the Ripper is historic.
Terrifier 2 didn't exactly have an airtight plot, but it felt like everything was connected. There was a through line to it all. It feels like the screenwriting lesson the director learned from the second movie is that you can fix anything about a narrative that doesn't end up working in the next movie. Apparently 35 minutes were cut out of Terrifier 3, which might explain the lack of cohesion, but Terrifier 3 is still over 2 hours long, and it's shorter than the second movie, but somehow felt longer than Terrifier 2 to me. Speaking of which, it feels like Sienna's been in a long hibernation like Art the Clown, and came out of it worse than when she went in. It would have been cool to see Sienna even stronger from her climactic defeat of Art at the end of Terrifier 2, becoming more badass, dedicated to hunting Art down, a dynamic character. But instead the movie goes down the typical survivor's guilt route where Sienna's just really sad about living while her friends didn't.
I see images of my dead friends and relatives on a daily basis.
The only interesting thing to come from Sienna's survivor's guilt is her seeing one of her dead besties as a zombie taunting her.
I'm dead, and you killed me.
It made me think that this is going to be an American Werewolf in London thing where all of Art's past victims haunt Sienna as ghosts to try to turn Sienna crazy like Vicky, but no, that's not what happens at all.
Can I have a piece of toast?
It seems like the director was just uncomfortable with the idea of Art actually being challenged. The director's okay with Sienna overcoming Art through a magic Deus Ex Machina sword, but the idea of Sienna steadily growing through her grueling experiences is the true Terrifier for the director. It just feels like the threequel recycle shit from Terrifier 2 where Sienna is seeing Art, but nobody believes her, thinks she's crazy. Just kinda lame to me.
Even if he was alive, which he isn't, wouldn't you want to get as far away from here as possible, as far away from you?
We do get some flashbacks with Sienna and her mysterious comic artist dad that further explain the origin story of the winged Xena chick Sienna becomes. These scenes are touching and add pathos to Sienna, but they kind of feel like scenes that could have been in Terrifier 2.
Can't you defeat Blaster Man?
Oh, yeah. 10 Blaster Man.
Ultimately, Sienna is fixated on Art the Clown, but it doesn't feel like their stories are truly connected until Art randomly decides to pay Sienna a visit when it's final act time. There's no real journey for Sienna leading to a confrontation with Art. He just shows up to her when he decides to. As an aside, I felt like the movie was setting up Sienna's cousin to be the suspicious character.
How'd you know I don't like cereal?
And there'd be a twist that the cousin was another vessel for the little pale girl the whole time, manipulating Sienna, drawing Sienna to Art. But that's not the case. The cousin is just a sequel hook, and maybe they'll do something like make her possessed and evil in Terrifier 4 to challenge Sienna, but I thought Sienna's relationship with her cousin was a waste in this film. She's just Jonathan 2.0, but less edgy, adding stakes to the final act just because she's a little girl, like the little girl in the opening of the film.
Jesus, Gabby!
Obviously, everything in this movie is ultimately in service of Art the Clown and his bloody art, and the gore is incredible. It generally looks much more realistic, whereas the previous films had a cool sort of comic booky haunted house look to the gore. The gore this time around looks pretty convincing, which adds to the visceral impact of the kills. There are still over-the-top, wacky, cartoony kills like Art freezing shit and crushing it like a bloody frozen fish stick. Or Art chainsawing the fuck out of a dude down to the guy's taint and making a bloody angel in his juices. The movie's still got plenty of goofy kills, they're just executed at a higher fidelity, which extends to the overall look of the film itself. Terrifier 3 really looks like a huge leap visually and production value-wise from the previous installments. It's still a relatively low-budget film, but they stretch the budgets of these movies far, and even farther this time around, to where it doesn't need to look like some porno tape you found out in the woods as a stylistic choice, which does have a certain appeal, but I like that the film is more focused on trying to look as good as possible as a movie released in 2024, instead of pretending to be a movie from the 70s, reaching a larger audience beyond die-hard horror fans.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown is great. He never talks, and he doesn't even laugh, which is a huge handicap for any clown. But he can do so much with the character through subtle and not-so-subtle facial expressions and body language. And the film is ultimately, for better or worse, a return to the roots of Terrifier 1, where the story of Art's half of the film just doesn't matter at all. It's an illusion. A big playground where Art can do his thing until he eventually decides to converge with Sienna's story. Art's half of the film is much more focused on his anarchic upheaval of the Christmas season, beginning with Art crossing paths with an alcoholic mall Santa and Clint Howard? Wow! They got Clint Howard for this movie? Holy shit! There's also a Tom Savini cameo in the film. Pretty cool, but man, Clint Howard, no way!
I'd fuck you. My wife's dead.
Art's various Christmas adventures are a pure diversion, just killing time in the movie with quite a few people being killed in the process.
We make people happy.
It feels like the movie wants to be an edgy Christmas slasher film, but honestly, besides the gore, Terrifier 3 is a fairly lighthearted Christmas horror movie compared to some of the bleaker entries in the past. Terrifier 3 doesn't seem to understand that to make a truly upsetting Christmas horror movie, you need to cut deeper than an axe or chainsaw can reach. You need to dredge up traumatic childhood shit, mix in difficult subjects to approach during the holidays.
I'm gonna have an abortion.
Creating uncomfortable associations with Christmas in an audience's minds. That's what ultimately sticks with people and why something like the OG Christmas slasher Black Christmas is so effective today. Hell, even the heavy-handed Silent Night Deadly Night works better as an assault on the Christmas season.
$31. Merry fucking Christmas.
I mean, a subplot of Black Christmas involves a little girl who's never even seen, but her death is so much more traumatic than the handling of the little girls in danger in Terrifier 3, because the mother in Black Christmas is so frantic to find her daughter, and when the little girl turns up dead, the grief of the performance is so much more brutally devastating than gore could hope to achieve.
I just know Claire is dead. I can just feel it.
Honestly, they could have gone off the wall and had Art just kill the real Santa Claus instead of a fake one. If demons and shit exist in this universe, then fucking Santa Claus can. That's at least more upsetting than just some dude in a Santa suit getting killed, and it's no less goofy than a famous clown serial killer with tons of podcasts and videos dedicated to his lore showing up in public places and nobody recognizing him or being all that suspicious of him.
That's not our Santa Claus.
There was a lot more potential to have Art go on a full-blown killing spree as Santa over the course of the film, but it feels like beyond the opening scene, it only really extends to him blowing up a mall with some kids in it, making Art the Clown just like a terrorist, I guess.
Bam! There was an explosion right there.
Again, it feels like Terrifier 3 takes the easier roads towards edginess, and it just ends up not being edgy. I will say having Vicky wear a crown of thorns in a Christmas movie was pretty edgy, though, both literally and figuratively. Art's Christmas Adventure, which probably should have been the subtitle of Terrifier 3, is the highlight of the film. It's clear that it's the material the director was more interested in, but beyond the amusement of Art's antics and the cool kills, Terrifier 3 just doesn't buzz me as a horror movie like Terrifier 2 did. Nearly all of Art's victims in this movie get tied up and are helpless in various other ways with no chance of escaping or fighting Art. It becomes much more of a torture-y movie than suspenseful. Very little in the way of chases or fights happen for most of the film, and even important characters have unearned deaths off screen. There aren't stakes at all until the final act, which has a cool climactic chainsaw versus sword fight, but it's ultimately a repeat of the predictable Deus Ex Machina sword shit from Terrifier 2. Speaking of which, Sienna mentions that she needs to retrieve the sword again from the Terrifier attraction.
I have to go back to the Terrifier.
So I was anticipating a scene where she has to find it, avoiding traps left by Art or even Art himself. But Sienna just gets the sword off screen.
Best gift ever.
Terrifier 3 is a little shorter than its predecessor, but it's still 2 hours long, a lot longer than the average slasher film, and the lack of stakes for most of the movie just makes the threequel more dull than Terrifier 2 for me. And it could have been fixed by streamlining the film more, consolidating the various plot threads, have Sienna at college with Jonathan, make the mall setting more important. The siblings could work there, maybe Jonathan is a mall elf. So we have a more direct connection with the Santa that Art kills as a way to get close to the siblings again. Or something. I don't know, just something more focused like Terrifier 2. It really felt like the director wanted to try to say something with Terrifier 2 beyond the gore, which made it refreshing. But it seems like the higher budget, the Christmas theming, and a cliffhanger ending were used as substitutes for saying anything interesting with Terrifier 3.
I don't get into all that blood and gore.
The upcoming Terrifier 4 is supposedly the last film in the series, but I kinda doubt it. 3 made an insane amount of money. They're gonna go to the Art the Clown well until it's dry.
I'll beat on him!
And a lot of my complaints with Terrifier 3 will likely be addressed in 4. With a cliffhanger sequel hook going in, Terrifier 4 should theoretically have a much more focused narrative drive behind it. At least that's what I'm hoping for. Terrifier 3 ends in a very bleak way with no closure, but it sets up the plot of the next film. Terrifier 2 just ended with Art the Clown isn't dead. Not exactly a lot of juice there story-wise. It didn't seem like the director knew what he was going to do with Terrifier 3 beyond wanting to make a Terrifier 3. So with Terrifier 4, it at least seems like he has an idea of where he wants to take the story next. As for Terrifier 3, I didn't hate it, like I said. I think it's ultimately okay. I guess I just hope that since I like Terrifier 2 quite a bit, I'd feel the same about Terrifier 3. But I really just didn't like 3 anywhere near as much as the second film. Terrifier 3 is a huge technical improvement over its predecessors, though. The gore is grand, and seeing Art the Clown in a Christmas setting is fun, but the threequel isn't the artistic statement that the second movie set out to be. But the art, of course, is still there. I give Terrifier 3 a Tom Savini out of Clint Howard. Honestly, though, I'm still amazed by the Clint Howard get. How they managed that? I think he'd be, like, super busy and stuff. They had to have spent most of the budget casting Clint Howard, right? Anyway, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everyone. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of the support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you like this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like previews, VIP Discord server access, private movie night streams, and credits in videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula t-shirts and other merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. See you all next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.